Nature has its own way of exposing secrets, even those buried $40 million deep. In the spring of 2024, deep within Mexico's Sierra Madre Mountains, a massive grizzly bear named El Solitario was about to prove this true. His powerful paws would unknowingly trigger a chain of events that would bring hardened cartel soldiers, desperate federal agents, and determined wildlife rangers into a deadly collision course in one of North America's most remote territories. The discovery should have remained buried in that cave, lost among the ancient limestone formations where the bear had made his winter den. Instead, it became the spark that would ignite a firestorm. Within 72 hours, 3 different cartel recovery teams would enter the wilderness. Within a week, the DEA would launch their largest operation of the year. And somewhere in between, a lone bear would find himself at the center of a multi-million-dollar hunt that would change the Sierra Madre Mountains forever. This is not just another story about drug money or wildlife encounters. This is a tale where nature's raw power collides with human greed, where ancient instincts meet modern crimes, and where one bear's innocent curiosity unleashes consequences that no one could have predicted. What happened in those mountains would shock even the most hardened veterans of both the Wildlife Service and drug enforcement. But to understand why, we need to start at the beginning, with a hungry bear emerging from hibernation and a secret that was never meant to be found. The Sierra Madre Mountains held many secrets beneath their ancient pines, but none quite like El Solitario. Local rangers had given him this name after years of tracking his solitary movements through the wilderness. Standing nearly 8 feet tall when raised on his hind legs, the massive grizzly bear had earned both respect and distance from the few humans who knew of his existence. His territory stretched across 30 miles of rugged mountain terrain, encompassing deep valleys and hidden cave systems that had sheltered him for nearly a decade. As winter's grip began to loosen in early March, El Solitario stirred from his long hibernation. The morning air carried the first hints of spring, along with something else, something unfamiliar. His sensitive nose detected traces of human scent, unusual for this remote part of his territory. The smell lingered around the deeper sections of his cave system, where the limestone tunnels twisted into darkness. Hunger drove him forward, his powerful frame moving with surprising grace through the narrow passages. The cave had served as his winter den for 3 seasons, but he had never ventured into its deepest chambers. The human scent grew stronger as he followed the winding tunnel, his claws clicking against the stone floor. The passage suddenly opened into a wider chamber, where moonlight filtered through a narrow crack in the ceiling. In the dim light, El Solitario's paw struck something unusual. Not the natural debris of the cave floor, but something manufactured, something that didn't belong. Several large duffel bags lay partially hidden behind a formation of rocks, their material sturdy and waterproof. The bear's natural curiosity, combined with his post-hibernation hunger, led him to investigate further. His powerful claws easily tore through the first bag. Bundles of paper spilled across the cave floor, releasing a strange mix of scents. Some of the bills carried traces of cocaine, others the lingering smell of human hands and plastic storage. To El Solitario, these were simply interesting new objects to explore. He had no concept of the $40 million now scattered across his cave floor, no understanding of the human value assigned to these rectangular pieces of paper. The bear's investigation became more thorough. He dragged the bags through the chamber, his teeth testing the material, his paws spreading the contents. Some bundles of cash became lodged in crevices, others were scattered through the tunnel system as he played with his discovery. The waterproof bags had preserved the money perfectly through the winter months, but they were no match for the curious exploration of a half-ton grizzly bear. Unknown to El Solitario, his every move was being recorded. High in the chamber corners, carefully hidden trail cameras activated by motion sensors captured his discovery. Originally placed to monitor the money cache by cartel members, these cameras now documented something their owners had never anticipated. Their infrared capability clearly showed the bear's interaction with the money, recording as he unknowingly dismantled one of the cartel's major storage sites. The cameras silently transmitted their footage through a secure network, each image of the bear pawing through millions in cash, each video of bundles being torn apart, reached phones and computers belonging to increasingly concerned cartel members. El Solitario's innocent exploration was about to trigger a response that would shatter the peace of his mountain home. As the day progressed, the bear continued his spring routine, unaware of the chaos he had unleashed. He foraged for early spring plants near the cave entrance, drank from a nearby stream, and occasionally returned to investigate his unusual discovery. The paper bundles held little interest compared to his search for real food, but he would return to play with them several times, further spreading the money through his den. By sunset, the cameras had transmitted hours of footage. El Solitario settled near the cave entrance for the night, his massive form silhouetted against the dying light. In cities hundreds of miles away, cartel leaders were hastily organizing recovery teams. The peaceful isolation of the Sierra Madre Mountains was about to be broken, all because of one bear's curious discovery in the depths of his den. In a luxurious mansion on the outskirts of Mexico City, Victor Ramirez stared at his phone screen in disbelief. As the head of money operations for the Sierra Cartel, he had overseen hundreds of cash storage locations. But never had he seen anything like this. The trail camera footage showed a massive grizzly bear, literally playing with $40 million in cash. His hands trembled as he replayed the video for the fourth time. The secure room around him buzzed with nervous energy as other cartel lieutenants gathered to watch. Nobody spoke. They all knew the stakes. This money represented 3 months of their operation's profits, carefully hidden in what they had believed to be the perfect location. Remote enough to avoid law enforcement, yet accessible enough for periodic checks. Now they watched as their perfect plan unraveled in the jaws of a bear. Manuel Torres, the cartel's second-in-command, broke the tense silence. "Who chose this location?" His voice was deadly quiet. The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees as everyone looked away. Finally, a young lieutenant named Carlos stepped forward, his face pale. "I supervised the storage team, sir. We scouted the area for weeks. There were no signs of bear activity during our surveys." Carlos tried to keep his voice steady, but fear crept in at the edges. In the cartel world, mistakes of this magnitude often carried fatal consequences. Torres studied Carlos for a long moment before turning to Ramirez. "How many recovery teams can we assemble by morning?" "3 teams, 20 men each," Ramirez responded quickly, grateful for the shift to practical matters. "We have men stationed in nearby cities who can reach the area within hours. But sir, there's another problem. The spring thaw has started. The mountain roads will be treacherous, and large groups moving in will attract attention." The room erupted in hurried planning. Maps were spread across tables as team leaders were contacted. Each hour that passed increased the risk of their money being lost forever or worse, discovered by authorities. The bear had already scattered an unknown amount through the cave system. If even a single bundle found its way out of the cave, if a hiker or ranger stumbled upon it, the entire operation could be compromised. In a smaller town at the base of the Sierra Madre, local police chief Maria Delgado noticed unusual traffic patterns on her morning patrol. 3 large SUVs had passed through in the pre-dawn hours, heading toward the mountain roads. In her 15 years of law enforcement, she had learned to trust her instincts. Something was wrong. Back in Mexico City, the cartel's recovery operation was taking shape. The first team would secure the immediate area around the cave. The second would handle the money recovery, bringing specialized equipment to navigate the cave system. The third would maintain a perimeter, watching for law enforcement or civilian interference. All teams were given the same warning. The bear was to be avoided if possible. A dead grizzly would bring unwanted attention from wildlife authorities. Carlos, seeking to redeem himself, volunteered to guide the first team. He had originally scouted the location and knew the treacherous mountain pass. Torres agreed, but his cold smile suggested this was more punishment than opportunity. Everyone understood that Carlos would be held personally responsible for any further complications. As the teams mobilized, the cartel's intelligence network buzzed with activity. Local police scanners were monitored. Satellite images of the area were studied for any signs of law enforcement presence. The operation had to be quick and quiet, but moving 60 heavily armed men into a remote wilderness area, even in small groups, would not go unnoticed for long. Police Chief Delgado's suspicions grew as 2 more convoys passed through her town by midday. She photographed their license plates and called her contact at the federal police. Years of experience told her these weren't ordinary tourists or hunters. The vehicles were too new, too similar, and the men inside too alert. They had the look she had seen before, the careful watchfulness of cartel soldiers. By sunset, all three recovery teams had established base camps in different sectors of the mountain range. Their vehicles were hidden under camouflage netting, and advanced scouts were already moving toward the target cave system. Radio communication was kept to a minimum. Night vision equipment was distributed. The operation would begin at first light. In the command center, Torres and Ramirez watched more trail camera footage, studying the bear's patterns. El Solitario had returned to the cave several times during the day, seemingly unbothered by the destruction he had caused. The cartel leaders could only watch helplessly as millions in cash became a plaything for the massive grizzly. Time was running out, and they all knew that somewhere in the vast bureaucracy of Mexican law enforcement, wheels were beginning to turn. Dawn broke over the Sierra Madre mountains with an unsettling quiet. The usual morning chorus of birds had gone silent, disturbed by the presence of unwelcome visitors. Three cartel teams converged on El Solitario's territory from different directions, their movements careful but leaving signs that any experienced ranger would notice. Broken branches, disturbed ground, the subtle indicators of large groups moving through pristine wilderness. Senior Park Ranger Juan Martinez spotted the first signs during his early morning patrol. 18 years in these mountains had taught him to read the landscape like a book, and today's story worried him deeply. Fresh tire tracks marked the service road, despite the area being closed to vehicles during the spring thaw. More concerning were the boot prints, military grade, multiple sets, moving with purpose toward the high country. Meanwhile, El Solitario emerged from his cave, unaware of the approaching danger. The morning air carried new scents, human presence stronger than before. Under normal circumstances, the bear would have retreated deeper into the wilderness. But the cave contained something that kept drawing him back. The scattered money had begun to mix with his usual bedding, creating an unusual nest that appealed to his instincts. The first confrontation occurred mid-morning. Two cartel scouts from the eastern team crested a ridge and found themselves 60 yards from the massive grizzly. They froze, their hands instinctively moving to their weapons. El Solitario rose to his full height, 8 feet of muscle and power, his warning growl echoing across the valley. The men slowly backed away, radioing their location with shaking hands. The bear's size had caught them off guard. No one had mentioned he was quite this large. Ranger Martinez called in his observations to headquarters, then continued up the mountain on foot. His radio crackled with similar reports from other rangers. Something big was happening in their wilderness. He passed a hidden camera typically used for tracking wildlife movement and made a mental note of its location. That footage might become important later. By midday, the cartel teams had established a loose perimeter around the cave system. Carlos, seeking redemption, led a small group toward the main entrance. The spring thaw had made the terrain treacherous. Melting snow created slick conditions on the rocky slopes, and the warming temperature increased the risk of slides. Nature itself seemed to be working against them. El Solitario's behavior began to change as more humans invaded his territory. His usual calm demeanor shifted to agitation. The bear paced the ridgelines, his powerful form visible to the cartel teams below. Each sighting sent ripples of tension through the armed men. They had come prepared for law enforcement, not for dealing with an aggressive grizzly protecting his den. A second encounter proved more dangerous than the first. 3 cartel members attempted to approach the cave from a narrow ledge. El Solitario burst from a stand of trees beside them, far more quickly than anyone expected from an animal his size. The men opened fire in panic, their shots going wide as they scrambled for safer ground. The gunfire echoed through the valleys, shattering the mountain silence. Ranger Martinez heard the shots and immediately called for backup. This was no longer just suspicious activity. Something had to be done before the situation spiraled completely out of control. But backup would take hours to arrive. The remote location that had made this spot perfect for hiding cartel money now worked against everyone involved. The cartel teams began to feel the pressure of time and conditions. The spring sun melted more snow, sending streams of water through the cave system. Each hour increased the risk of the money being ruined or washed away. Carlos pushed his team closer to the cave entrance, ignoring the growing risks. His desperation to recover the money outweighed his caution. El Solitario's reactions grew more aggressive with each encounter. The bear's territory had been invaded, his den threatened. Centuries of instinct drove him to defend his space. He charged another group of cartel members, forcing them to flee down a scree slope. Two men were injured in the panicked descent, their weapons lost among the rocks. The situation reached a breaking point in the late afternoon. Carlos and his team made a direct attempt to enter the cave. They had barely crossed the threshold when El Solitario emerged from the shadows within. The bear's roar filled the confined space, the sound amplified by the cave walls. In the chaos that followed, more shots were fired. The bear's massive form charged through the group, sending men flying. Carlos himself was thrown against the cave wall, his rifle skittering away across the rocks. As the sun began to set, the cartel teams found themselves in an impossible situation. They had failed to recover the money, lost two men to injuries, and now faced the reality of trying to operate in the darkness. The bear seemed to be everywhere at once, appearing suddenly out of the gathering shadows, becoming bolder with each encounter. The mountain itself had become their enemy, its terrain and weather working against every move they made. Unknown to the increasingly desperate cartel members, their gunfire and movement had attracted more than just ranger attention. Federal police units were mobilizing. DEA agents were being briefed. But for now, as darkness fell over the Sierra Madre, it was just the cartel teams, a handful of watching rangers, and one very angry grizzly bear. The night would bring its own dangers, and morning would reveal just how much this failed operation would cost the Sierra Cartel. In a hastily assembled command center in the town of Sierra Vista, DEA agent Sarah Cooper studied satellite images of the mountain range. Police Chief Delgado's alert had started a chain reaction within law enforcement that was now impossible to stop. The unusual vehicle movements, reports of gunfire, and the presence of known cartel associates had created a perfect storm of probable cause. "Those aren't hunters up there," Cooper explained to the assembled team of Mexican federal agents and local law enforcement. "We've identified at least 3 separate groups, all moving with military precision, all converging on this area." Her finger circled a section of the map where Ranger Martinez had reported the gunfire. The investigation was moving at unprecedented speed. Local police had photographed license plates that matched vehicles previously connected to Sierra Cartel operations. Cell phone signals, despite the cartel's attempts at communication discipline, had created a clear pattern of movement toward the mountains. But it was the wildlife footage that proved most revealing. Ranger Martinez's foresight in noting the camera locations paid off. Federal technicians accessed the park's wildlife monitoring system, and the cameras had captured more than just El Solitario. They showed armed men moving through the wilderness, their faces clear enough for facial recognition. Several were matched to known cartel members. The bear, in its innocent exploration of the cave, had triggered the very surveillance system that would expose the entire operation. Inside the command center, phones began ringing with calls from Mexico City. This was becoming bigger than a simple weapons or drug bust. The presence of heavily armed cartel teams in a national wilderness area had attracted attention at the highest levels. Federal police commanders authorized the deployment of helicopter units, though they would have to wait for better weather conditions before flying into the mountain range. Agent Cooper's team made another breakthrough by midday. Analysis of cell phone data revealed a pattern of regular visits to the cave site over the past year. Each visit corresponded with known drug shipment dates. The bear had unknowingly discovered not just cash, but evidence of a major money laundering operation. The cave was their bank, Cooper explained to her superiors via secure video link. Based on the communication patterns we're seeing, this could be one of several similar sites. The cartel's reaction to the bear's discoveries suggests we're looking at their entire financial network. Local media had begun to pick up on the unusual law enforcement activity. Reports of gunfire in the wilderness area couldn't be contained. The first news helicopters appeared on the horizon, but were quickly warned away due to an emergency airspace restriction. However, the story of armed men in the mountains had already hit social media. By late afternoon, the investigation had expanded beyond the immediate area. Federal agents raided suspected cartel safe houses in 3 nearby cities. Documents were seized, computers confiscated. Each new piece of evidence supported what El Solitario's discovery had first revealed. The Sierra Cartel had created an elaborate network of wilderness cache storage sites using their remote locations to hide their money laundering operations. The Bears' disruption of this single site had caused the cartel to break its own security protocols. Their panic response to the discovery had exposed not just the money, but their entire operational structure. Surveillance photos showed cartel leaders visiting locations they had previously avoided. Phone calls were made that revealed new connections, the organized crime equivalent of turning on all the lights. Chief Delgado, working with federal authorities, established checkpoints on all roads leading out of the mountain range. The net was tightening, but more importantly, every hour brought new evidence of larger cartel operations. The Bears' accidental discovery was becoming the thread that, when pulled, began unraveling years of careful criminal planning. As evening approached, the media narrative began to take shape. Local news stations picked up the story of El Solitario, though facts were still scarce. Headlines about a bear discovering cartel money seemed too sensational to be true. Yet within law enforcement circles, the reality was proving even more significant than the headlines suggested. Agent Cooper prepared her teams for night operations. Thermal imaging equipment was distributed. Federal police tactical units took up positions around the mountain's base. The investigation had evolved from a simple money recovery into one of the largest anti-cartel operations of the year. And somewhere up in the darkness of the Sierra Madre Mountains, a grizzly bear continued his spring routine, unaware that his curious discovery had set in motion the potential downfall of one of Mexico's most powerful criminal organizations. The final confrontation began in the false dawn of early morning. Clouds hung low over the Sierra Madre Mountains, creating an eerie twilight in which shadows moved like living things. El Solitario, having retreated deeper into his cave system during the night, emerged to find his territory transformed into a battlefield. Carlos and his remaining team had made a fatal miscalculation. Desperate to recover the money before federal authorities closed in, they had split into smaller groups to search the cave system's multiple entrances. This strategy, born of desperation, ignored the most basic rule of the wilderness: never separate when a predator is nearby. The bear's first appearance caught the eastern team completely off guard. El Solitario burst from a side tunnel, his massive form filling the narrow space. In the confined cave, his size was overwhelming. Two cartel members dropped their weapons in panic, fleeing toward the exit. Their flashlight beams created crazy patterns on the cave walls as they ran, adding to the chaos. Meanwhile, federal authorities had begun their final approach. Agent Cooper, coordinating with Mexican tactical teams, had positioned snipers on the surrounding ridges. Their thermal scopes revealed the full extent of the situation. Multiple heat signatures moved through the cave system like ants in a disturbed nest. But one signature, larger and brighter than the others, moved with terrible purpose through the tunnels. The operation took an unexpected turn when Ranger Martinez made a stunning discovery. While monitoring the western approach, he found a second cave entrance, previously unknown even to the Park Service. Fresh tire tracks led to a carefully concealed storage space containing not just money, but detailed ledgers. The bear's disruption of the main site had caused the cartel to breach their own protocols, leading authorities to their real record-keeping. Inside the main cave system, Carlos faced the consequences of his failure. His team's flashlights illuminated scattered money everywhere, shredded and mixed with cave dirt. But they also revealed something else. The bear's activities had exposed older storage containers hidden deeper in the cave. Some contained weapons. Others held documents dating back years. El Solitario had unknowingly uncovered not just a money storage site, but a physical archive of the cartel's operations. The bear's next appearance triggered a cascade of events that would be talked about in law enforcement circles for years. Emerging from the darkness behind Carlos's position, El Solitario's roar echoed through the cave system. The sound sparked panic among the scattered cartel teams. In their frenzy to escape, they ran directly into the federal police positions outside. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Cartel members burst from multiple cave entrances, some firing blindly behind them at the bear, others surrendering immediately to the surrounding law enforcement. El Solitario, driven by pure survival instinct, charged after the fleeing men. The sight of a full-grown grizzly bear bursting from the cave mouth, silhouetted against the dawn sky, sent even hardened federal agents diving for cover. In the chaos, Carlos made a desperate attempt to salvage something from the operation. He sprinted toward a hidden vehicle containing backup hard drives and additional ledgers. But he had waited too long. Chief Delgado, who had positioned herself on the western approach, personally made the arrest. The man who had chosen this location, who had started this chain of events, was finally in custody. As the sun rose fully over the mountains, the full extent of what El Solitario had uncovered became clear. The bear's discovery had led authorities to more than just cash. The cave system contained evidence linking the Sierra Cartel to operations across 3 countries. Hidden rooms revealed weapons caches, drug processing equipment, and most importantly, financial records dating back a decade. Agent Cooper couldn't believe their luck as she surveyed the scene. The bear didn't just find their money, she reported to her superiors. He found their entire backup archive. They've been using these remote caves as secure storage, thinking they were too inaccessible for law enforcement to find. One curious bear brought down their entire operation. The media arrived as federal teams secured the scene. Helicopter shots captured the aftermath, handcuffed cartel members being led away, evidence teams cataloging the discoveries, and most dramatically, El Solitario himself, calmly fishing in a stream as if nothing had happened. The contrast between the bear's peaceful behavior and the human chaos he had unleashed became the defining image of the operation. The following weeks brought revelation after revelation. The recovered documents led to arrests across Mexico and the United States. The Sierra Cartel's financial network collapsed as hidden accounts were exposed. Multiple high-ranking cartel leaders were indicted based on evidence found in their secret archive. What had started as one bear's curious exploration had escalated into the largest cartel bust in recent history. But perhaps the most surprising outcome concerned El Solitario himself. The wildlife cameras that had first captured his discovery became a social media sensation. Millions watched the footage of the massive bear playfully scattering millions in cash, unknowingly serving as an agent of justice. Public fascination with his story led to increased funding for wilderness protection and stricter penalties for using protected lands for criminal activities. The cave system was sealed off by authorities, but El Solitario simply moved to another den deeper in the wilderness. Park rangers reported that he showed no lasting effects from the ordeal, returning to his solitary patterns as if nothing had happened. The mountains had kept many secrets over the years, but thanks to one bear's curiosity, some of the darkest ones had finally come to light. In the end, the story of El Solitario and the cartel millions became legend in both law enforcement and wildlife circles. It served as a reminder that nature operates on its own terms, indifferent to human schemes and valuables. A bear looking for a comfortable den had accidentally triggered one of the most significant organized crime breakthroughs in North American history. The Sierra Madre Mountains returned to their usual peace. The gunfire and chaos faded into memory. But somewhere in those vast wilderness spaces, a massive grizzly bear continues his solitary wanderings, unaware that he had become a symbol of justice in its purest, most unplanned form. If you enjoyed this incredible tale of El Solitario, there are many more amazing stories of wildlife encounters waiting to be told. Subscribe to our channel for daily stories of remarkable animal discoveries and the unexpected ways they change our world. From bears stumbling upon criminal enterprises, to wolves leading rangers, to archaeological treasures, nature never ceases to amaze. Join our growing community of wildlife enthusiasts and be the first to hear these extraordinary tales as they unfold.